Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. In this episode, we're talking about Belarus, a country that's been giving its citizens a masterclass in how not to treat people. Think of it as the ultimate guide for dictators who want to be the absolute worst, with politically motivated charges often being brought before a phony court. This is unfortunately the story of our guest today, one of the 20 individuals who in most cases have little in common apart from opposing the Lukashenko regime, who are being tried in absentia in a mishandling of justice you can only expect in a distinct few world capitals. Think Pyongyang, Tehran, Moscow. And before we get into all of that, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
The Belarusian government has commenced trial proceedings in absentia against 20 prominent political analysts. The accused, who are affiliated with some of the world's leading universities and think tanks, face charges of conspiring to overthrow the government and participating in an extremist group. The trial could result in up to 12 years of imprisonment and asset seizure upon their return to Belarus. The analysts, all of whom have left Belarus, have dismissed the charges as baseless, expressing no expectation of a fair trial in the country. This trial is the latest development in a series of repressive measures following the disputed 2020 presidential election that awarded Alexander Lukashenko his sixth term. The election results were widely contested by the opposition and Western nations, leading to mass protests and severe government backlash. More than 35,000 individuals have been detained, with thousands reporting brutal treatment while in custody. The government has also shut down numerous independent news outlets and right groups, imprisoning journalists and silencing voices of dissent. Approximately 500,000 people, including key opposition figures, have fled Belarus, a nation with a population of 9.5 million. The political analysts on trial are accused of advising and aiding opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya during her 2020 campaign against Lukashenko. Tikhanovskaya herself was forced to leave Belarus shortly after the election and was sentenced in absentia to 15 years in prison last year. As the international community watches closely, the trial underscores the dire human rights situation in Belarus, where the Vyazna Center reports 1,400 political prisoners currently held.
And now, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. Let's start with the big picture. The government, led by President Alexander Lukashenko, has been on a rampage against anyone who dares to speak out. We're talking about journalists, human rights offenders, opposition politicians, and pretty much anyone with a pulse who doesn't toe the government line. According to the latest Human Rights Watch report, almost 1,500 people are locked up in politically motivated charges. That's Belarus in the 2020s for you. Now, you might think, surely the international community is stepping in, right? Well, yes and no. While the European Union, Canada, the US, and the UK have extended sanctions against Belarus, it's a bit like slapping a band-aid on a gunshot wound. Lukashenko's regime is still very much in control, and they're not letting up. One of the most disturbing trends is the treatment of political prisoners. The detainees aren't just sitting in cells playing cards. Instead, they're being tortured, subjected to solitary confinement, and forced to record repentance videos. And it's not just adults facing the crackdown. Even students and school children aren't safe. Kids who express dissenting opinions risk being expelled, and their parents could lose their jobs or even their parental rights. Then there's the crackdown on journalists. Yes, reports on the truth in Belarus, and you might just end up in prison for it. Between October 2022 and mid-September 2023, at least 34 media workers were detained on charges ranging from discreditation of Belarus to creation of an extremist formation. Following and sharing independent media content is considered aiding extremist activity. The repression doesn't stop at the borders. Belarusians in exile are also under attack. The government has passed laws to strip them of their citizenship if they're convicted on participation in an extremist organization, which could mean anything from attending a protest to liking a Facebook post. And good luck renewing your passport abroad. You'll have to return to Belarus. To do that, which is like walking into a lion's den with a stake strapped to your chest. Let's not forget the death penalty. Belarus remains the only country in Europe and Central Asia to carry out executions. In 2023, the death penalty was expanded to include high treason for state officials and military personnel. It's a grim reminder that, for some, there's no escape from Lukashenko's reach. In summary, Belarus is a country where the government treats its citizens like enemies and runs the justice system like a nightmare. It's a place where dissent is crushed and fear rules the day. And while the world watches, often with horror, it is clear that more needs to be done to support the brave individuals fighting for their rights and freedom in Belarus. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Hanna Liubakova, a Belarusian journalist in exile and non-resident fellow of the Atlantic Council. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello.
Now, first of all, thank you for joining us. It's a very rare opportunity to actually talk to someone with your kind of experience. And of course, we know that you're currently being tried in absentia along with 19 other individuals. Can you first help us run down of how that happened?
Well, I don't know the exact details of my case or news from the trial that began around 2 weeks ago. Did I attempt to seize power? Because this is one of my criminal case that I'm aware of. Have I done it through my tweets or my writing for the Atlantic Council or similar comments to international media like this one? I remain unaware. So the whole trial is Kafkaesque. I cannot contact my appointed attorney in Minsk in Belarus. I cannot have case documents. And basically, I really kind of don't know the details and exact accusations. So I never imagined myself being in this situation.
Right, so you along with 19 others were tried specifically, well, most likely due to the opposition views to Lukashenko. And of course, we're looking at a banana republic situation where a lot of Trump trial and charges are being thrown against political opposition. Can you tell us how that feels like?
The only thing that I did was to provide free and biased information to what was happening in Belarus about peaceful protests, about people bravely coming out to the streets. Journalism is a service, as we know, but the regime consider us as traitors. We only did our job. We only provided analysis of the situation. And I think for many of us, first, it's obviously scary because the regime wants to intimidate us. They want to scare us, even if though we are in exile. Second, it is unfair. We tried to help. We wanted to spread information. We wanted to raise awareness of Belarus. And of course, it's the sign of the entire situation and the level of repression that is inside Belarus right now. We have 1,400 only recognized political prisoners. The real number might be much more. And it just shows you the level of repression inside Belarus at the moment.
Right, and speaking of level of repression, like you mentioned earlier, you don't even know what are the charges being brought to you in specifics. And of course, with any trial, the defendant should be able to present their own arguments. This seems to not be the case. Can you also highlight that aspect and like how the trial is supposed to take place?
Well, so they announced the beginning of the trial on a different website, so they did not really inform us, even according to their criminal code that they created, not to mention the international procedures and laws. So first, they violated this. Second, I applied to be at a court via video conference, which they allowed perfectly well during the COVID times, but they mentioned that I'm not allowed to do this. Third, I asked for to contact my appointed attorney because everyone has the right to self-defense and have an attorney inside the country. And they shared the name, but the attorney never got in touch with me. I think she's scared also of being disbarred. I know her name, and I tried to contact her. I messaged her, but she ignores me. And of course, again, no details, like no information from the process itself. So basically, if you ask me what is happening right now with my case inside Belarus, I know how, well, perhaps weird and funny that might sound, but I don't really have any details. So I don't really know. I'm like left in the darkness of what is happening right now inside Belarus regarding my case and to how many years I'm going to be sentenced in absentia.
Right, and perhaps this lack of information is not a bug but a feature. It is perhaps something that, well, the closed-door nature of these type of trial, do you think that there might be a reason for this obfuscation of information?
First, they don't want to let us know the details. I don't know the name of my prosecutor, the name of the judge is public, but otherwise they want to hide as many sort of witnesses, as many people involved in this repression as possible. It's a quite prominent case. We are 20 analysts that are well known to the international community. So I think they are kind of scared of names being known, and that's the feature of the system that we have been observing in the past years. Second, they probably don't have much, to prove. They don't have evidence. The only thing that we did was information, was analysis, and this is something that the regime is scared of. Third, I think they, again, are hiding as many details as possible because they also want to send a message to those inside the system. They don't want to legitimize us in a way. They want to let people inside the system know, don't cooperate with them, don't provide them information, don't look even in our direction, because they can be repressed like anyone in Belarus right now can be repressed for maintaining contacts with analysts, with journalists. So I cannot call and ask for a comment anyone inside the country.
Right. You mentioned being repressed, that anyone can be repressed just by having contact with you guys. And I'm wondering if any kind of personal threat has came with your family, your friends, for example, or anyone you know that has also perhaps gotten into trouble just because they got into contact with you.
They constantly come to the apartments of our families, not only to my family, but I know about other colleagues of mine and not only journalists and analysts, but basically many activists, many dissidents face the same issue. Lukashenko recently promised to intimidate, to threaten, to even repress the families and take away our real estate. My countryside house that I still had in Belarus was put under arrest. This is how it's called. So probably after the trial, it will be confiscated. So they want to take away everything that we have in Belarus, freeze our bank accounts and all of that. But they also want to keep, in a way, our families as hostages there, intimidate them and show us that if we speak out, our families will be also repressed. And there have been real cases of even families of military volunteers, people who fight for Ukraine, Belarusians in Ukraine right now, whose families have been arrested.
Right, and like you mentioned, there's an information vacuum when it comes to the situation in Belarus. There's probably 1,400, if not more, well, most likely more people also being repressed in a very similar manner. And of course, you bringing the voice to those without one is a very kind of admirable, if not very stressful job. So how are you coping with that psychologically?
It's a hard one. Well, first, I think all of us here understand that we are the voices, as you rightly said. And probably there is no time, there is no chance for us to be weak because we know that people inside the country cannot speak out because they will be repressed, they will be jailed. I have friends in jail, and that's my mission. To help them really get released, or at least have their conditions improved in jail. And this is something that keeps me moving. And I know that all my friends, all my colleagues here abroad have the same motivations. What I mentioned a few times before is that it's also very hard, very difficult to see how Belarus is being occupied by the regime. Right now, where freedoms are not accessible, available to people, or peaceful people who want to live in a normal, stable country. And also, seeing the economy being destroyed and kind of understanding that there is now so much Russian influence in Belarus that we will probably have to deal with it for years. That will come even after Belarus is free.
All right, like you mentioned before, you are bringing the voice to those without one, and I think you put it very aptly that, you think that there's no time for you guys to be weak. For that, that's a very powerful message for all of us out here that's trying to relay this message, but perhaps haven't witnessed it firsthand. So even though we are bringing the same message across the world, I think it'll be more powerful if you can do so for us. And with that, for our international audience out there who needs to hear this message, what can you tell them, and how will they be able to be part of this voice?
Well, first of all, remember about Belarus. With all the conflicts around the world, I understand that it's very hard to forget what's happening there. But Belarus is important geographically, strategically here in Europe, and well, even globally, as we see. People of Belarus have been repressed, of course, we know about that, but they have not given up. And this is something that I've been trying to explain. We know from protests in 2020, mass protests that swept across the country, but also from the current data and sociology, that they are against any involvement in the war against Ukraine. They're against Russian nukes. They're against attacks of Ukraine from the territory of Belarus, and many other things that show us that people want to be part of a democratic community, want to be part of a European family. And this is something that I've been trying to explain, that, well, despite repression, censorship, we are still able to get information to them inside the country, and they listen to us journalists, they listen to us analysts, and we are asking not to put this iron curtain and not to isolate the Belarusians even more. The regime must be punished, but not the people.
Right. My personal observation throughout that is that even your call to action seems to be one that is very pragmatic. That just tells me how much experience you have when it comes to advocating for this cause and to try to reach as much people as possible. Can you tell us a little bit about your personal experience about trying to relay this message? And again, for the people out here who are listening, what are some of the hardships and what are some of the ways that could better help people better understand the dire situation of the human rights violation currently going on in Belarus?
For me personally, it was really hard to see throughout all these years how short the focus is. And again, I understand it as a journalist, as an analyst. I know how it works. I know about the information cycles. But Belarus for me is not just a country that I report about or have obviously some expertise in, but this is my country, and having friends in jail, again, this is very personal. And it's been really hard to explain that, right? That, well, people want to be active. They just don't have many opportunities to do that. And this is something that people outside Belarus, right, people abroad might not believe in. If you don't see protests, if you don't see this open opposition, one can think that, well, it's over, right? We should forget about that. Well, people, give up. People like Lukashenko again. And this is not true. And we know about this from sociology. We know about this from our personal conversations with those inside, with those people who are still willing and able to talk to us. And perhaps this is, where most of my energy is going right now, to kind of explain, to remind, to raise awareness, to provide, some energy into that and efforts, and explain to governments, to think tanks, to media, to just citizens that it's important to support Belarusians inside Belarus.
All right. Thank you so much. From one journalist to another, thank you so much for being such an inspiration and fighting the good fight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And in the meantime, thanks for being with us on Eastern Express. And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the latest stories from the East that you don't want to miss. More than 90 countries have rallied behind Ukraine's call for peace, emphasizing the nation's territorial integrity as the cornerstone for any potential peace agreement. This consensus emerged at the conclusion of a pivotal summit held in Switzerland.
The summit, hosted by Switzerland, marked a concentrated effort to navigate a path towards peace, nearly 28 months after the onset of the conflict in Ukraine. Despite Russia's absence from the proceedings, the gathering of international leaders underscored a collective commitment to resolving the ongoing war. The final statement was signed by the majority of over 90 countries and international organizations in attendance. Some of the important developing countries did not do so, including India, Brazil, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. The document emphasized the importance of the United Nations Charter and noted that the basis for achieving lasting peace in Ukraine must be respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky considered the meeting format a success. He expressed confidence that the topics of the conference, nuclear energy and weapons, food security and the return of Ukrainian POWs and deported children, will allow the start of practical actions towards restoring full security and peace.
Armenia has recalled its ambassador from Belarus, signaling rising tension with Russia. This decision comes on the heels of Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's announcement confirming Armenia's withdrawal from the Moscow-led Collective Security Treaty Organization.
The Armenian government action against Belarus, a known ally of Russia, underscores the growing rift between Yerevan and Moscow. Pashinyan has been vocal about his stance, declaring that neither he nor any official Armenian representative will visit Belarus as long as Alexander Lukashenko remains president. The recall appears to be a response to Belarus' involvement in supplying weaponry to Azerbaijan, Armenia's adversary, from 2018 to 2022, a period during which Armenia and Belarus were ostensibly allies within the CSTO framework. In retaliation, Belarus has also recalled its ambassador from Yerevan, with the Belarusian foreign ministry suggesting that Pashinyan's actions are a diversion from domestic issues. In retaliation, Belarus has also recalled its ambassador from Yerevan, with the Belarusian foreign ministry suggesting that Pashinyan's actions are a diversion from domestic issues. The tensions between Armenia and Russia extends beyond the spat with Belarus. Armenia's recent expressions of solidarity with Ukraine, particularly the visit by Armenian officials to Bucha, have further strained relations. Russia has called these actions unfriendly, and the Kremlin has sent a protest note to Armenia.
In the volatile region of the South Caucasus, tensions between Armenia and Azerbaijan have once again flared up, with both nations accusing each other of ceasefire violations. The recent claims have sparked concerns of renewed hostilities between the two countries, which have a history of conflict over the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region.
The Armenian Ministry of Defense has refuted Azerbaijani reports that Armenian forces recently initiated a ceasefire bridge. Armenia described these allegations as misinformation and stated that no unusual activities were recorded along the border by EU observers. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has proposed the establishment of a joint mechanism with Azerbaijan to investigate these allegations. This suggestion aims to determine the validity of these claims and to prevent further escalation of tensions. This incident comes amid a fragile peace in the region, following the deadly clashes in September 2022 that resulted in nearly 200 soldiers' deaths.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.